Juana Williams, the Aces did, to be that defensive stopper. I think that Tiffany Mitchell can play that role for the Aces this year.
The rain was falling relentlessly on that November evening when Caitlin Clark stepped out of the downtown Indianapolis Community Center and noticed something that made her stop mid-stride. Her breath catching as the cold wind cut through her jacket. Because there on a bench beneath a flickering streetlight sat a figure she recognized instantly despite the years that had passed, Kesha Williams, her former Dowling Catholic teammate, curled protectively around a small bundle beneath a thin, inadequate blanket, clutching a sleeping baby to her chest as rain darkened her clothes and gathered in the hollows of the pavement. And before Caitlin had even spoken a word, she sensed that whatever had brought Kesha here carried a weight far heavier than coincidence. Caitlin had come to the center that evening seeking quiet, the kind of grounding that came from working with children who cared nothing for professional leagues or media narratives. Children who only wanted help with homework, someone to listen, someone to believe in them, and for months that place had been one of the few where she could simply be herself rather than a symbol or a headline. But as she crossed the car park, she almost missed the bench entirely until something about the curve of that body around the baby stopped her, a posture born of instinct and protection. And when she stepped closer and the light revealed Kesha's face, the past rushed back all at once, memories of shared practices, whispered encouragements, and the quiet leadership Kesha had brought to their team when she joined during Caitlin's sophomore year, elevating everyone around her with her calm intelligence and steady resolve. This, however, was not the woman Caitlin remembered, not the confident point guard with sharp eyes and composed presence, but someone worn down by exhaustion, hair pulled back without care, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the blanket around the baby, and Caitlin felt an immediate wave of guilt that someone who had once meant so much to her life could be sitting here in the cold without her knowing. For a moment she hesitated, sensing Kesha's desire to remain unseen. But the rain intensified and the thought of a baby out in that weather erased any doubt, and she stepped forward, calling her name softly so as not to startle her or wake the child. And Kesha looked up with eyes filled with recognition and shame in equal measure, as if the life she had been holding together by sheer will had suddenly been exposed. They sat together on the bench as rain soaked through Caitlin's jacket, the world narrowing to the sound of water and distant traffic. And over the next hour, Kesha told a story that reshaped Caitlin's understanding of sacrifice and love, explaining that the baby in her arms, 3-month-old Maya, was her niece, the daughter of her younger sister Jasmine, who had been battling addiction for years. And when Maya was born, social services became involved, leaving Kesha with a choice that did not feel like a choice at all: step in or let the child disappear into the foster system. And she had stepped in without hesitation, taking on responsibility she was barely equipped to manage, working 2 jobs, stretching every pound and dollar until there was nothing left to stretch. She spoke quietly about the eviction notice, about sleeping in her car, about using the community center during the day to keep Maya warm and fed, and about ending up on that bench because when the doors closed at 8 she had nowhere else to go. Her voice breaking only when she spoke of the fear of losing the baby, of letting the one pure thing she had left slip away. And Caitlin felt something fracture inside her as she listened, because this was the same woman who had once steadied her during close games, who had believed in her before the world knew her name, now sacrificing everything without asking for recognition or rescue. What struck Caitlin most was not the desperation of the situation, but the ferocity of Kesha's love, the way her arms never loosened around Maya even as fatigue pressed down on her. And when Caitlin gently asked why she had never reached out, why she had carried this alone, Kesha's smile was sad and self-effacing as she said that Caitlin was living her dream now, that she did not want to be a burden or a reminder of a life that had gone wrong. And in that moment, Caitlin understood how pride and love can sometimes disguise themselves as silence. She told Kesha simply that friendship does not expire when lives take different paths, that bonds forged in struggle do not dissolve in success, and that there was no version of her life in which she would walk away from this bench and leave them there. And what followed unfolded not as a dramatic rescue, but as a series of practical acts grounded in respect. A hotel room that night, legal advice the next morning, childcare support through her foundation, housing assistance arranged quietly and without publicity, and a job opportunity that worked around Maya's needs rather than against them. Over the following months, Caitlin watched Kesha rebuild piece by piece, never framing it as charity but as support, and she saw again the strength that had once anchored their team now directed towards motherhood and protection, while Kesha, in turn, reminded Caitlin that greatness is not measured solely by trophies or records, but by what one is willing to give up for someone else. The encounter that began on a rain-soaked bench became a turning point for both of them, deepening Caitlin's commitment to using her platform not for spectacle but for quiet intervention, and reaffirming that the most powerful moments of connection often arrive unannounced, when we are tired, distracted, and least prepared, asking not for applause but for presence. And years later, Caitlin would say that the night she found Kesha was not a story about rescue but about recognition.
10 from the floor in this quarter before Carrington.
Enrique's brother,
Yep.
and Dejanay's father.
Good son, travel. On her feet. There's Nneka.
"You're exactly where you always said you'd be," Kesha said quietly, her voice carrying a pride that was unmistakable even through exhaustion. The same pride that had once driven her to push through punishing practices, to study game film long after others had gone home, to refuse shortcuts or excuses. And now that same pride had become a barrier, keeping her from reaching out when she needed help most, because she did not want to be the teammate who hadn't made it, the one who needed rescuing, the one whose life had veered off course. And as Caitlin looked at Maya sleeping peacefully in her arms, tiny fingers curled around Kesha's hand as if instinctively anchoring herself to safety, she saw love in its purest form, unconditional and fierce, untouched by fear or circumstance. And she knew she could not allow that pride to define the story being written here. "You're not the teammate who couldn't make it," Caitlin said firmly, her voice steady despite the rain. "You're the teammate who stepped up when it mattered most. You chose love over convenience. You put a child's needs ahead of your own comfort. That isn't failure, Kesha. That's heroism." Something in those words finally broke through, and the tears Kesha had been holding back spilled freely as they sat together on that bench, two former teammates bound by something deeper than basketball had ever been. And in that moment, Caitlin made a decision that would quietly but permanently change both of their lives, because she did not offer a check or a temporary fix. She stood, held out her hand, and said simply that Kesha and Maya were coming home with her, that tonight they would be safe and tomorrow they would work out a real solution. Kesha hesitated, protesting that she could not impose on Caitlin's life, her career, her responsibilities, but Caitlin answered without hesitation that her responsibilities included looking after the people who had helped shape her into who she was, that Kesha had been there when needed a teammate, and now she would be there when Kesha needed a friend. The drive to Caitlin's house passed in near silence, broken only by the soft sounds of Maya in her car seat. And over the following days, as Kesha and the baby settled into a fragile routine, the full weight of what Kesha had been carrying became clear, juggling substitute teaching by day and cleaning offices at night, stretching every pay packet to cover rent she could no longer afford, formula, nappies, and contributions towards her sister's rehabilitation program, all done without complaint, fueled entirely by love. Yet Caitlin could see the cost, the exhaustion etched into Kesha's movements, the way she lived on determination and caffeine, sacrificing her own health for Maya's stability, noble but unsustainable. And it was then Caitlin made another decision, one that surprised even herself. She offered Kesha a role within her foundation, working directly with youth programs, not as an act of charity but as recognition, because Kesha had always possessed a natural ability to connect, to guide, to steady others through uncertainty, and Caitlin explained that she had been coaching all along, coaching Maya through impossible circumstances, coaching her sister towards recovery, and this would simply give structure and security to what she was already doing. The position brought stability, a steady income, healthcare for both Kesha and Maya, and the flexibility to build a future without sacrificing dignity. But the transformation did not stop there, because having